Marcus Sterling adjusted his expensive tie as he walked through the marble lobby of Sterling Industries, the tech empire his father had built from nothing. At 28, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no and never expected to be. His polished shoes clicked against the floor as employees quickly stepped aside, offering nervous smiles and hurried greetings. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," his assistant Jennifer said, falling into step beside him as he entered the elevator. "The new hire for the research department starts today. Her name is Elena Rodriguez." Marcus barely glanced up from his phone. "Another desperate graduate, I assume?" "Make sure she understands the hierarchy here. I don't have time for ambitious newcomers who think they can skip the ladder." The elevator doors opened to the 15th floor, where the research and development department buzzed with activity. Marcus had always viewed this floor as necessary but beneath his attention. Real power happened in boardrooms, not laboratories. As he walked past the cubicles, his eyes fell on a young woman sitting at one of the corner desks. She was perhaps 25, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing a modest blue blouse that looked like it came from a discount store. She was focused intently on her computer screen, typing with remarkable speed. That must be the new girl, Marcus thought, noting how she seemed completely absorbed in her work, unaware of his presence. Most employees would have jumped to attention by now. He approached her desk, clearing his throat loudly. "Excuse me." Elena looked up, her brown eyes meeting his with calm curiosity rather than the usual mixture of fear and admiration he was accustomed to. "Yes? I'm Marcus Sterling. This is my company." He waited for the recognition, the stammering apology, the sudden nervousness that always followed his introduction. Instead, Elena simply nodded. "Nice to meet you. I'm Elena Rodriguez. I just started in the research department today." Her casual response caught him off guard. No sir, no obvious intimidation, no attempt to impress him. She spoke to him as if he were just another co-worker. "Well, Elena Rodriguez," he said, his voice taking on a condescending edge, "I hope you understand that this isn't some casual workplace. We have standards here, expectations. I trust you're prepared to meet them?" Elena's expression didn't change. "I always meet my commitments, Mr. Sterling. Is there something specific you needed?" Marcus felt a flash of irritation. Her composure was unsettling, almost disrespectful. "I'm just making sure you understand your place here. This company operates on respect and hierarchy. I suggest you learn both quickly." "I understand hierarchy perfectly well," Elena replied quietly, turning back to her computer. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." Marcus stood there for a moment, stunned by her dismissal. No one had ever dismissed him before. Employees usually hung on his every word, desperate to make a good impression. This woman treated him like he was interrupting her day. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself frequently visiting the research floor, always with some excuse about checking on projects or reviewing progress. But, truthfully, he was fascinated by Elena Rodriguez. She arrived early, left late, and seemed to accomplish more in a day than most employees managed in a week. What bothered him most was how she interacted with others. While she was polite and professional, she never seemed impressed by anyone's title or position. She spoke to the janitor with the same respect she showed the department head. When Marcus tried to assert his authority in her presence, she listened politely but never seemed affected by his power displays. "She thinks she's too good for this place," Marcus complained to his friend Derek over drinks one evening. "Probably some scholarship student who doesn't understand how the real world works." But, even as he said it, something didn't feel right. Elena's work was exceptional. The projects she touched seemed to move forward with unusual efficiency. Other employees sought her input on problems, and she always seemed to have insightful solutions. One afternoon, Marcus overheard a conversation between two senior researchers. "Did you see Elena's analysis of the Chun project?" one was saying. "She spotted issues that our entire team missed. It's like she's done this kind of work for years." "I heard she single-handedly redesigned the Miller protocol over lunch," the other replied. The client was amazed. said it was exactly what they needed but couldn't articulate. Marcus frowned. This didn't match his image of Elena as just another entry-level hire trying to make an impression. Her work was drawing attention from clients and senior staff alike. The next morning, he decided to test her. He walked to her desk carrying a thick folder. "Elena, I need you to review this proposal and give me your thoughts by end of day," he said, dropping the folder with a loud thud. It was a complex merger analysis that usually took teams of lawyers and financial experts weeks to complete. Elena opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. "This is the Hartwell acquisition?" "Yes." "Think you can handle it?" Marcus asked with a smirk. "The numbers don't work," Elena said after flipping through several more pages. "Hartwell's intellectual property portfolio is overvalued by at least 40%. Their patents expire within 2 years, and their R&D pipeline is essentially empty. You'd be buying a name and some aging technology." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. Elena had just summarized what had taken his financial team 3 weeks to conclude. And she'd done it in less than 5 minutes. "How did you?" he began, then stopped himself. "Lucky guess." Elena shrugged and handed the folder back. "Mathematics isn't really about luck, Mr. Sterling." That afternoon, Marcus called his head of human resources. "I want everything we have on Elena Rodriguez. Background check, education, previous employment, everything." The file that arrived the next morning was surprisingly thin. Elena Rodriguez, 25 years old, graduated summa cum laude from State University with degrees in computer science and business. No previous corporate experience. No internships at major companies. She'd worked part-time at a small consulting firm while in school, but nothing that would explain her obvious expertise. "It doesn't make sense," Marcus muttered, studying her employment application. Where did she learn to analyze financial data like that? He decided to dig deeper, but every attempt to learn more about Elena's background hit dead ends. Her references checked out, but they were vague. Her academic record was impeccable, but her professors remembered her as quiet and focused rather than exceptional. Meanwhile, Elena continued to excel at every task assigned to her. She solved problems that stumped senior engineers. She improved processes that had been inefficient for years. She seemed to understand the company's operations better than people who had worked there for decades. Marcus found himself watching her more closely, looking for clues about who she really was. During meetings, she asked questions that revealed deep understanding of subjects far beyond her supposed experience level. When executives presented their strategies, she would sometimes make small comments that completely reframed the discussion. But, despite her obvious competence, Elena remained in her corner cubicle, collecting an entry-level salary, and showing no signs of ambition or dissatisfaction. She never asked for promotions, never complained about her assignments, and never tried to network with higher-level executives. Why isn't she pushing for advancement? Marcus wondered. Anyone with her abilities should be demanding recognition. The answer came during the quarterly board meeting, though Marcus didn't recognize it at the time. His father, the company founder, mentioned that they were expecting a visit from some major investors who were considering a significant partnership. "The Chun Group has been very interested in our artificial intelligence research," his father said. "They're sending some representatives next week to evaluate our capabilities." Marcus nodded absently. He was more concerned with impressing these investors than understanding who they were. The following Monday, Marcus arrived at the office to find unusual activity in the lobby. Security was heightened, and several people in expensive suits were being escorted upstairs. He recognized the signs of a high-level visit. As he waited for the elevator, he noticed Elena walking toward the building entrance. She was dressed differently today, wearing a tailored black suit instead of her usual modest work clothes. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried herself with a new kind of confidence. "Working late again?" Marcus called out, assuming she was just arriving early as usual. Elena turned and smiled at him, but there was something different in her expression. A knowing look that made him suddenly uncomfortable. Something like that, she replied, but, instead of heading toward the research floor, she walked toward the executive elevator that required special clearance. Marcus watched in confusion as Elena approached the security desk. The guard looked up, checked something on his computer, and immediately stood up with obvious respect. "Good morning, ma'am," the guard said, handing Elena a special access badge. "They're waiting for you in the executive conference room." As Elena disappeared into the executive elevator, Marcus stood frozen in the lobby, his mind racing. Something was very wrong with this picture, but he couldn't quite grasp what it was. The pieces of the puzzle were all there, scattered around him for weeks. Elena's impossible competence. Her calm confidence in every situation. Her lack of concern about hierarchy or advancement. Her deep understanding of complex business operations. But Marcus was so convinced of his own assumptions about who she was and what she represented that he couldn't see the truth that was hiding in plain sight. He had no idea that the woman he'd been dismissing as a powerless entry-level employee was about to walk into a boardroom where his father and the company's entire executive team were waiting to hear what she had to say. The elevator doors closed, carrying Elena toward a meeting that would change everything Marcus thought he knew about power, respect, and the dangerous assumptions people make about others based on appearances alone. Marcus spent the entire day in a state of confused anxiety. He tried to focus on his usual tasks, but his mind kept returning to the image of Elena entering the executive elevator with the kind of access that took most employees years to earn. Every time he walked past her empty desk, his confusion deepened. By afternoon, he couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. He called his assistant Jennifer into his office. "The Chun Group meeting today," he began carefully. "How did it go?" Jennifer looked surprised. "I thought you knew, Mr. Sterling. Your father specifically said that meeting was classified. Even I wasn't allowed to see the attendee list." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years at the company, he had never been excluded from a major investor meeting. His father always insisted he observe these negotiations as part of his business education. "There must be some mistake," Marcus said. "Call my father's office and ask when I should join them." 10 minutes later, Jennifer returned with a puzzled expression. "Your father's secretary said the meeting is still ongoing and that your presence wasn't requested. She seemed surprised that you didn't know." Marcus paced his office, his mind racing through possibilities. The most logical explanation was that this was some kind of preliminary meeting, a casual introduction before the real negotiations began. But that didn't explain Elena's involvement or her access to the executive floor. Around 5 o'clock, Marcus decided to position himself near the executive elevator. If Elena was coming down, he would finally get some answers. He pretended to review documents in the adjacent hallway while keeping one eye on the elevator doors. When they finally opened, Marcus felt his world shift on its axis. Elena emerged from the elevator, but she wasn't alone. Marcus's father, Charles Sterling, was walking beside her, deep in conversation. Behind them came the company's board of directors, including some of the most powerful business leaders in the city. They were all listening intently to something Elena was saying. "The implementation timeline could be accelerated if we restructure the development teams," Elena was saying. "But I would recommend a phased approach to minimize disruption to existing operations." Charles Sterling nodded thoughtfully. "Your analysis of our current inefficiencies was remarkably thorough. Some of those issues have been troubling us for years." Marcus pressed himself against the wall, trying to remain invisible while straining to hear their conversation. What he heard made no sense. "Ms. Chen," one of the board members was saying, "your proposal for the partnership structure addresses every concern we discussed. The profit-sharing model is particularly innovative." "Ms. Chen." Marcus felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Elena Rodriguez was Ms. Chen. But that would mean. "I appreciate your confidence in this venture, Mr. Sterling," Elena replied. "The Chen Group believes this partnership will be mutually beneficial. Your company's domestic market presence combined with our international infrastructure could revolutionize the industry." Marcus couldn't breathe. The Chen Group wasn't just any investor. They were one of the largest technology conglomerates in Asia, with holdings worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And Elena wasn't just their representative. Based on the deference everyone was showing her, she was someone with significant authority in their organization. As the group moved toward the building exit, Marcus caught fragments of their continuing conversation. "When should we expect the formal contract proposals?" Charles was asking. "My legal team will have the initial drafts ready by Friday," Elena replied. "But I want to spend a few more days observing your operations firsthand before we finalize the terms." "Of course. Though I have to ask, Ms. Chen, was it really necessary to work undercover in our research department? We would have been happy to provide any information you needed." Elena smiled, and Marcus could see a hint of amusement in her expression. "Sometimes you learn more about a company's true culture from the inside. Besides, it's been quite educational." Marcus felt sick. For weeks, he had been treating one of the most powerful business leaders in the world like she was an entry-level nobody. Every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture, every attempt to put her in her place had been directed at someone who could destroy his father's company with a single phone call. As the group disappeared through the lobby doors, Marcus slumped against the wall. His phone buzzed with a text message from his father: "Important meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We need to discuss your role in the Chun partnership. Be prepared." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He replayed every interaction he'd had with Elena, seeing them now through a completely different lens. Her calm confidence wasn't arrogance or naivety, it was the quiet assurance of someone who held real power. Her dismissive responses to his authority weren't disrespectful, they were the reactions of someone who operated on a level far above his own. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office early, hoping to catch Elena before the meeting with his father. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow undo weeks of embarrassing behavior. But her desk remained empty. At exactly 9 o'clock, Marcus sat in his father's office, facing both his father and Elena. She was back in her simple work clothes, her professional facade replaced by the modest appearance that had so effectively concealed her true identity. "Marcus," his father began, "I'd like you to meet Elena Chen, the executive vice president of the Chun Group and the daughter of their founder." Marcus opened his mouth to say that they'd already met, but Elena spoke first. "Actually, Mr. Sterling and I have been working together for several weeks. He's been very instructive about your company culture." The way she said instructive made Marcus's face burn with shame. His father looked between them with growing concern. "I see. Marcus, MS. Chen's evaluation of our company will determine whether we move forward with a partnership worth over $2 billion. I trust you've made a good impression?" Marcus wanted to disappear. Elena could destroy this deal with a few words about how the owner's son had treated her. She could expose his arrogance, his assumptions, his complete failure to recognize who she was. But Elena simply smiled and said, "Your son has been very revealing about how Sterling Industries operates. I've learned a great deal from our interactions." Charles relaxed slightly. "Excellent. Now, Miss Chen, what are your initial thoughts about the partnership?" For the next hour, Elena presented a comprehensive analysis of Sterling Industries that revealed an understanding of the company that went far beyond what any outside observer should possess. She had identified inefficiencies in departments Marcus barely knew existed. She had spotted opportunities for growth that even the senior executives had missed. She had mapped out a 5-year expansion plan that could triple their market share. "Your research department, in particular, has tremendous potential," Elena said. With the right leadership and resources, they could become industry leaders in artificial intelligence applications. Marcus realized that Elena hadn't just been working undercover as a random employee. She had strategically placed herself in the research department because that was where the real innovation was happening. While he had been focused on boardroom politics and executive privileges, she had been learning about the actual heart of the company. "There are some cultural challenges that would need to be addressed," Elena continued. "The company operates with a very rigid hierarchy that can stifle innovation and discourage talented employees from contributing their full potential." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "What would you recommend?" A more merit-based system. Promotion and recognition based on actual contribution rather than family connections or politics. Employees should feel empowered to share ideas regardless of their official title or position. Marcus felt every word like a physical blow. Elena was describing everything wrong with his approach to leadership without actually naming him. Additionally, Elena said, glancing briefly at Marcus, there seems to be a disconnect between some members of the executive team and the day-to-day operations of the company. Bridging that gap would be essential for the kind of integrated partnership the Chen Group envisions. After the meeting, as Elena gathered her materials, Charles asked her to stay behind for a private conversation. Marcus was dismissed with instructions to think about how he could contribute more effectively to the partnership. Walking back to his office, Marcus felt like he was seeing his company through new eyes. Employees who had always seemed eager and respectful now appeared nervous and fearful. The deference he had always enjoyed felt hollow and forced. The power he had taken for granted revealed itself as nothing more than an accident of birth. He spent the rest of the day researching the Chun Group online, learning about the empire that Elena's family had built. Elena herself had graduated from Harvard Business School at 21, earned a PhD in economics from MIT at 23, and had been instrumental in expanding her family's business into 12 countries across 3 continents. While Marcus had been coasting on his father's success, Elena had been building a legitimate reputation as one of the most brilliant strategic minds in international business. While he had been demanding respect based on his last name, she had been earning it through actual accomplishment. The most humbling realization was that Elena hadn't needed to work undercover at all. The Chun Group could have partnered with any company in the world. They had approached Sterling Industries because they saw potential, not because they were desperate for the deal. That potential could disappear in an instant if Elena decided that Marcus's attitude represented the true character of the company. As the day ended, Marcus made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. He needed to find Elena and have an honest conversation about his behavior. Not because he was afraid of losing the business deal, but because he genuinely wanted to apologize for treating her with such disrespect. He found her in the research department, back at her corner desk, working late as always. But now he understood that she wasn't just another dedicated employee trying to impress her boss. She was someone who had voluntarily taken a massive step down from her usual position to understand his company from the ground up. "Elena," he said quietly, approaching her desk. "Could we talk?" Elena looked up from her computer, and Marcus saw something different in her expression now. The careful neutrality she had maintained for weeks was gone, replaced by a directness that made him realize she was no longer playing her role as a simple employee. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. What did you want to discuss?" Marcus pulled up a chair, noting how strange it felt to be asking permission to sit near someone he had considered beneath his notice just days ago. "I need to apologize," he began, then stopped. The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of his mistake. "Actually, that's not enough. I need to acknowledge that I've been completely wrong about you, about this situation, about everything." Elena studied his face carefully. "Go on." "I made assumptions about who you were based on how you looked, where you sat, what you wore. I treated you like you were powerless because I couldn't see past my own prejudices." Marcus felt his voice crack slightly. "I was so concerned with maintaining my authority that I never bothered to actually listen to what you were saying or recognize your obvious competence." "Why are you telling me this now?" Elena asked. "Because you found out who I really am?" The question hit Marcus like a slap. He wanted to say no, to claim that his realization had nothing to do with her identity. But he forced himself to be honest. "Partially, yes. Learning that you're Elena Chen made me realize how badly I had misjudged the situation. But, also..." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Watching how you conducted yourself these past weeks, I started to see that something was wrong with how I was approaching my role here. You made me question whether I was actually earning the respect I demanded." Elena leaned back in her chair. "What conclusion did you reach?" "That I wasn't earning anything. I was just expecting people to defer to me because of my last name, and I mistook their fear for respect." Marcus looked around the research department, where several employees were still working late. These people aren't loyal to me. They're afraid of me. And I never bothered to learn the difference. Fear can be a useful tool for maintaining control, Elena said carefully. Why does that concern you now? Because it's not leadership. It's just intimidation wearing a suit. Marcus met her eyes directly. You never seemed afraid of me, and that bothered me more than it should have. I kept trying to figure out what was wrong with you instead of asking what was wrong with me. For the first time since he had learned her true identity, Elena smiled genuinely. That's a more insightful answer than I expected. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Why did you work here for weeks without revealing who you were? You could have evaluated the company from the outside, or my father would have given you complete access to everything you needed. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her response. When the Chun Group considers major partnerships, we don't just evaluate financial projections and market potential. We evaluate character. How does a company treat people when they think no one important is watching? How do they handle power dynamics? What's their actual culture versus what they claim it to be? And what did you conclude about Sterling Industries? That it has tremendous potential held back by poor leadership development, Elena said bluntly. Your employees are talented and dedicated, but they're operating in an environment that discourages innovation and honest communication. Most of them are afraid to share ideas that might contradict established policies, even when those ideas could significantly improve operations. Marcus winced. Because of people like me. Because of a culture that values hierarchy over competence, Elena corrected. You're not the only person in this company who confuses authority with ability. What happens now? Marcus asked. Does the Chun Group walk away? Elena stood up and gathered her papers. That depends entirely on whether Sterling Industries is willing to change. The partnership we're proposing isn't just financial. We're looking for companies that share our values and our commitment to merit-based advancement. My father built this company from nothing, Marcus said defensively. He worked 18-hour days for decades to create what we have. I'm not criticizing your father's accomplishments, Elena replied. But building a company and sustaining it across generations requires different skills. What worked for a small startup may not work for a multinational corporation with thousands of employees. Over the following days, Marcus found himself observing his workplace with new awareness. He started arriving early and staying late, not to monitor other people's productivity but to understand what actually happened in the company when the executives weren't around. He discovered that many of his father's policies were being quietly ignored because they were outdated or impractical. Employees had developed informal networks to share information and solve problems because the official channels were too slow and bureaucratic. The most innovative ideas were coming from junior staff members who had no formal avenue to present them to decision-makers. Most troubling was the realization that his presence in any department immediately changed the atmosphere. Conversations became more formal, ideas became more cautious, and people started focusing more on avoiding mistakes than achieving success. Marcus began scheduling informal meetings with employees at all levels, asking them about their work, their challenges, and their suggestions for improvement. The initial responses were guarded, but gradually people began sharing honest feedback. The approval process for new initiatives takes so long that we usually just find ways to implement changes without official permission, one senior researcher told him. By the time we get through all the committees and reviews, our competitors have already moved ahead with similar innovations. We have brilliant people in this company, a department manager explained, but they're frustrated because good ideas get lost in the hierarchy. Someone with 20 years of experience has to get permission from someone who's been here 2 years but has the right title. Marcus started documenting these conversations and looking for patterns. What he found was a company full of intelligent, committed people who were constrained by systems that prioritized control over results. Meanwhile, Elena continued working in the research department, but Marcus noticed that other employees were starting to seek her input on projects beyond her official assignments. Word was spreading quietly that the new hire had unusual insight and expertise. Have you seen Elena's recommendations for the Johnson contract? One engineer asked another within Marcus's hearing. She identified optimization opportunities that could save us millions. Marcus realized that Elena was demonstrating the kind of leadership he had always claimed to possess. People sought her opinion because they trusted her judgment, not because they were afraid to ignore her. One afternoon, Marcus found Elena in the company cafeteria, sitting alone while reviewing documents on her laptop. He approached hesitantly, still uncertain about the appropriate way to interact with her. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "It's your cafeteria," Elena replied, but she gestured to the chair across from her. "I've been thinking about what you said about merit-based advancement," Marcus began. "If the Chun Group partnership moves forward, what kinds of changes would you recommend?" Elena closed her laptop and gave him her full attention. "That's a conversation for your father and the board of directors. I'm asking for your personal opinion. Not as a potential business partner, but as someone who understands leadership better than I do." Elena studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "The most important change would be creating pathways for talented people to advance based on their contributions rather than their connections. Your company has people with PhD-level expertise working in entry-level positions because they lack the right political affiliations or educational credentials. Like you were doing? Like dozens of your current employees are doing every day," Elena corrected. "I chose to work at that level temporarily. They're stuck there permanently despite their abilities." Marcus felt a familiar sting of shame. "What else?" "Decision-making authority needs to be distributed more broadly. The people closest to the problems are usually best positioned to solve them, but they often lack the authority to implement solutions. Meanwhile, people with authority are making decisions about situations they don't fully understand." "You're describing me again." "I'm describing most traditional corporate structures. The key is recognizing when the system isn't serving the organization's goals and being willing to change it." That evening, Marcus stayed late to call Elena's direct supervisor in the research department. He wanted to understand what her work had actually accomplished during her time there. "Elena Rodriguez has been extraordinary," the supervisor told him. "In 6 weeks, she's improved efficiency in 3 major projects, identified cost savings worth millions of dollars, and solved technical problems that had been stumping our senior staff for months. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it from a new hire." "Has she asked for any special recognition or advancement?" "That's the strange thing. She seems completely satisfied with her current role. Most people with her capabilities would be demanding promotions or threatening to leave for better opportunities. But she just focuses on doing excellent work and helping her colleagues succeed." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his office thinking about the contrast between Elena's approach and his own. While he had spent years demanding recognition and advancement based on his family name, she had earned genuine respect through her actions and expertise. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. He walked to Elena's desk and asked if she would be willing to present her observations about the company to the board of directors. "In what capacity?" Elena asked. "As someone whose insights could help us become the kind of organization worthy of a partnership with the Chun Group," Marcus replied. Elena looked at him carefully. "Are you prepared for what that conversation might reveal about the company's current leadership?" "I think it's time I learned the difference between being in charge and being a leader," Marcus said. "Even if it's uncomfortable." 2 days later, Elena stood in the same boardroom where Marcus had attended countless meetings, but this time the dynamic was completely different. Instead of the usual corporate theater, Elena presented a detailed analysis of Sterling Industries' operational strengths and cultural weaknesses. "The company has world-class talent and innovative potential," she told the board. "But it's being held back by communication barriers, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and a promotion system that doesn't reward actual performance." She presented specific examples of employees whose ideas had been ignored or delayed because they lacked seniority, and innovations that had been stalled by unnecessary approval processes. She also highlighted instances where quick decision-making by frontline employees had saved projects that would have failed under the traditional hierarchy. The solution isn't to eliminate structure, Elena explained, but to create systems that empower competence rather than just authority. Marcus watched his father and the other board members absorb Elena's recommendations. Some looked uncomfortable with the criticism of their management approach, but no one could argue with the evidence she presented. "Ms. Chen," his father said finally, "these observations suggest significant changes to how we operate. Do you believe Sterling Industries is capable of making such adjustments?" Elena glanced at Marcus before answering. Change is always possible when people are willing to acknowledge that their current approach isn't achieving optimal results. The question is whether the leadership is committed to actual transformation or just cosmetic adjustments. After the meeting, Marcus approached Elena as she gathered her materials. "Thank you for giving us honest feedback instead of just walking away," he said. "The Chun Group doesn't abandon partnerships because of initial problems," Elena replied. "We work with organizations that demonstrate genuine commitment to improvement." "And do you think Sterling Industries has demonstrated that commitment?" Elena looked at him directly. Today was a start. But real change will require sustained effort, not just good intentions. Marcus nodded, understanding that he was being evaluated not just as the son of the company founder, but as a potential leader who would be responsible for implementing the changes Elena had outlined. "I know I have a lot to prove," he said. "Both to you and to the employees who deserve better leadership than I've provided." "Proving it won't be about making grand gestures or dramatic announcements," Elena warned. "It will be about consistent actions over months and years. It will be about putting the company's success ahead of your ego, and empowering other people even when it diminishes your relative authority." Marcus felt the weight of that challenge, but, for the first time in his life, it felt like a challenge worth accepting. 6 months later, Marcus found himself back in the research department, but this time he was there to learn rather than to assert authority. Elena had long since revealed her true identity to the staff, but she continued to work alongside the research teams as Sterling Industries implemented the changes necessary for their partnership. The company had restructured its promotion system to emphasize performance over politics. They had created fast-track approval processes for innovative ideas and established regular forums where employees at all levels could present suggestions directly to decision-makers. Most importantly for Marcus, he had begun the long process of earning respect through his actions rather than demanding it through his position. It was harder work than he had ever imagined, but it was also more satisfying than the hollow authority he had previously wielded. As he watched Elena collaborate with a team of engineers on a breakthrough artificial intelligence application, Marcus reflected on how completely his understanding of power had been transformed. Real authority came from empowering others, not from diminishing them. True leadership meant creating environments where talent could flourish, regardless of its packaging. Elena looked up and caught him watching the teamwork. She smiled and nodded, a gesture that now conveyed not the careful politeness of a subordinate, but the mutual respect between equals who had learned to see past appearances and recognize the potential in every person they encountered.